Today I want to talk about something that's very important to me. This is something that I feel like was a blessing in my life and that I want to share it with you guys to help you on your diet and fitness journeys, whatever they may be. Now, this is the importance of having carbohydrates and potassium together in order to optimally store carbohydrates as muscle glycogen. What I believe and what I've experienced to be true through my experiences in my dieting journey is that having potassium with carbohydrates helps your body store those carbohydrates as muscle glycogen. Now, you could have a bag of Sour Patch Kids, and those Sour Patch Kids are going to have close to no potassium in them. Or you could have a cup of orange juice, and that orange juice is going to have around 450 milligrams of potassium and about 25 grams of carbohydrates. That potassium is going to help your body shuttle those carbohydrates into the muscle and store them as muscle glycogen. Now, if you're on a diet and you're doing a refeed, you want to store those carbohydrates in the muscle because that's going to help speed up your metabolic rate. One, in my opinion, I feel like the more muscle glycogen you have, the more you're going to speed up your metabolic rate when you're working out. And two, if they're getting stored in the muscle, they're less likely to get stored as fat. So it's a win-win situation. Now, this is something that I feel like is very important. And like if I have a cheat day and I'll have, some sort of carbohydrate that is not high in potassium, the next day I'll feel kind of watery. I'll feel like, I got a little bit of, subcutaneous water. I won't really feel that pump in the gym as much as I will if I have high potassium carbohydrates. I feel kind of more like, just a little bit fatter, a little bit, watery. But if I prioritize high potassium carbohydrates and I select things like orange juice, potatoes, I think sweet potatoes, bran cereal. See, a lot of cereal isn't high in potassium and it's very low in potassium actually, but bran cereal has about 200 milligrams of potassium relative to every 25 grams of carbohydrates, roughly. I like to shoot for having about 400 milligrams of potassium with every 25 grams of carbohydrates, and I want to get at least 200 milligrams of potassium with every 25 grams of carbohydrates. So I'm going to read to you a little bit of my notes here, and this is kind of going in depth on a couple other topics as well, but this is what I have here is have a diet log right here. This is my diet log. And then I just kind of made some notes about what I experienced. This is about a diet log for about a couple weeks here. And I made some notes on what I experienced. I've been experimenting with high potassium carbohydrates and potassium carbohydrates for a while now, probably, maybe a year or two. But I was doing it on accident, probably even before that. And I've only been really aware of it maybe for the last 6 months to a year. But I'm going to read to you a little bit of my notes and touch on a couple other subjects that I think are important in optimizing your cheat days when you're dieting. Because, when you have a cheat day, you want it to go to your muscles and you want it to speed up your metabolism. Two things I want when I got a cheat day is I want to make my muscles bigger and speed up my metabolism. Last thing I want to do is get fat. So I'm going to touch on these notes and then I'm going to kind of explain a little bit more on what I mean by them and touch on the other subjects a little bit afterwards. So, hypotheses and general notes and observations from time during log above. Now, this is referring to the log that I was talking about. So, separating carbs and fats and prioritizing high potassium carbohydrates is crucial in not only losing body fat but keeping it off. An individual could encounter two different situations during a cheat day / refeed day / meal. One being separating carbs and fats and prioritizing high potassium carbohydrates, the other being not intentionally separating carbs or fats, nor intentionally prioritizing high potassium carbohydrates. Sorry if the table's a little shaky too. I hypothesize that the first scenario will result in a higher metabolic rate, more muscle mass, and more of a loss in total body fat. I also hypothesize that the storage of glycogen in the muscle, which I also hypothesize to be higher in the first scenario to be is a key which I also hypothesize to be higher in the first scenario is a key determining factor in how the calories consumed during a cheat day / refeed day / meal can be used to most optimally increase one's metabolic rate. Because I hypothesize that the pump from massive stores of muscle glycogen speeds up one's metabolic rate. Based on these hypotheses, I find it imperative to separate carbs and fats during refeeds moving forward, or to at least ensure that all carbohydrates consumed have adequate potassium and insulin present to be optimally absorbed as muscle glycogen. Because I also hypothesize that aside from the separation of carbs and fats, insulin and potassium are the two most important factors in storing carbohydrates as muscle glycogen, alongside depletion. However, I feel insulin secretion and the separation of carbs and fats to be closely related because I feel fat to have the ability to blunt insulin to a degree, although I feel like this can be counteracted to a degree by choosing high glycemic carbohydrates when consuming them with large amounts of fats. So what I mean by this, and I'll touch on a couple of different aspects of it, is when you really got that pump in your muscles and they're full of muscle glycogen, I feel like that is what really speeds up your metabolism and increases your metabolic rate. And I feel like you could have the same amount of carbohydrates on two different cheat days, and if one is lacking in potassium and the other is high in potassium, the person who has the high potassium carbohydrates is going to have a higher metabolic rate in the long term because more of those carbohydrates are getting stored in the muscle as muscle glycogen, and that is speeding up your metabolism. The second thing I'll touch on is the separation of carbs and fats. I'll touch on that maybe more in another video, but I just feel that to be very important just for a lot of things, maybe not necessarily when bulking, but I feel like during refeeds and cheat days and stuff like that, it's important to optimally, just for optimal absorption, digestion, and metabolic pathways, those sort of things. And also insulin. So 3 things I feel like are important when optimally storing carbohydrates as muscle glycogen. One is obviously having carbohydrates. 2 is having potassium present. And 3 is insulin. So basically, to have the biggest pump that you can have, you need to have carbohydrates, insulin, and potassium. Now, you can have carbohydrates and potassium, but if you don't have insulin present, which I've done before, it's not going to be that great. Now, you can have a lot of insulin and a lot of carbohydrates, but if you don't have that potassium present, it's not going to be that great either. You need to have all 3. Those 3 work synergistically to just give you the greatest pump ever. So if you have like a very high carbohydrate, a very high glycemic carbohydrate by itself with no fat to blunt the insulin, and it's very high in potassium as well, that's going to be, in my opinion, the optimal scenario for storing that carbohydrate as muscle glycogen, alongside being metabolically depleted, which means you've been in a caloric deficit for a certain amount of time, which is also going to help your body store those carbohydrates optimally as muscle glycogen. You see people who diet for competitions, and then they eat whatever they want for a month, and they blow up like balloons, and all this stuff goes into the muscle, because that's what happens when you are depleted. Your body sucks everything up like a sponge. But the main thing I want to press on with this video is the importance of having potassium with carbohydrates. Very important in my opinion, and also important to make sure that insulin is present as well. So if you follow those couple guidelines, I think that it will help in your cheat days and your refeed meals. At least I hope it does. I really think it will. And until next time, hope you guys enjoy the video. Thumbs up.